The cable sings at 11:52 p.m., and Dorian Castellanos is the only person on the Veracruz Strait Bridge who knows that it shouldn't. He is 400 feet above black water, harnessed to a decommissioned maintenance gantry, wearing a headlamp he bought himself because his city-issued one was confiscated along with his badge, his keycard, and his employment. His gloved hand rests against a primary suspension cable that has just produced a sound no steel cable under normal tension has any business producing. A thin, high, almost musical hum, like a wine glass struck with a fingernail. He has heard that hum before in the last month before they took his clearance away. He puts his hand flat against the cable and listens the way 19 years of structural inspection taught him to listen. He looks down the cable's 1,100-foot span and sees, for the first time, a series of small bright marks against the cable's gray-black wire wrap. Symmetrical, evenly spaced, exactly the width of a hydraulic cable shear, exactly 7 of them. 70,000 vehicles a day. Tomorrow's morning commute starts at 5:40 a.m. It is 11:54 p.m. He has 5 hours and 46 minutes. Dorian Castellanos was, for 14 years, the city's senior structural inspector. In the month before the Drummond Avenue overpass collapsed, killing 11 people during Tuesday morning rush hour, he had filed a report flagging stress fracturing, recommending immediate load restriction. The report sat in a queue for 61 days before anyone with authorization power opened it. When the column failed, the city needed an answer fast. The review board's findings stated that procedural ambiguities made it impossible to assign definitive responsibility, and Dorian Castellanos' employment was terminated effective immediately. His license referred for review, named personally as a defendant in a civil suit. He has spent 11 months unable to find work as an engineer. Savings disappearing into a defense attorney he can no longer fully pay. A mortgage he is 6 weeks from losing. He has kept 3 things: his structural engineering knowledge, his rope access certification, and a complete indexed digital archive of every inspection report, every email flagging a concern, every internal document he managed to download before his network access was revoked. He still has his key to the maintenance gantry override panel, because in 14 years nobody updated the physical lock codes when they revoked his digital clearance. Dorian does not panic. He photographs the marks first, then climbs, 53 years old with a bad knee, free climbing a maintenance catwalk that hasn't been certified for foot traffic in 8 months, 400 feet above black water in the dark. By 1:15 a.m., he has documented 23 cable marks across both suspension cables. The pattern resolves into something with horrifying internal logic. Placed at the specific load-bearing nodes a structural engineer would calculate to be points of maximum stress concentration during peak load, meaning during exactly the morning rush hour beginning at 5:40 a.m. The cuts are partial, perhaps 30% of each point's individual wire strands. Under normal load, the cable could probably still bear it. Under the specific load profile of Tuesday morning rush hour, Dorian runs the numbers twice on the catwalk, laptop balanced on his knees. The cable's residual capacity crosses below the safety margin somewhere between 7:15 and 7:45 a.m. Not a slow failure. A cascading failure, cable by cable, each compromised point reaching its limit within minutes of the others, because the cuts have been placed to ensure that when the first cable fails, the redistributed load instantly overwhelms its neighbors. This is not vandalism. This is the work of someone who understands suspension bridge load mathematics at a level very few people possess. Dorian makes a list of who could have done this. The cuts required restricted structural drawings, calibrated hydraulic shearing equipment, rope access at height, and a window of time long enough to avoid detection. He remembers a maintenance contractor named Halvorson Infrastructure Solutions, whose billing patterns he had flagged 18 months before Drummond Avenue. Billing for remediation work that the structural evidence suggested had not actually been performed. His supervisor told him to stick to his lane. 18 months later, Drummond Avenue collapsed at a support column that, according to Halvorson's records, had received emergency remediation 14 months earlier. He searches Halvorson's corporate registration. The majority shareholder is a holding company called Meridian Civic Partners, whose registered agent is the same law firm that represented the city in the Drummond Avenue civil suit. In a capacity that resulted in Halvorson paying a confidential settlement 8 months ago, retroactively absolving Halvorson of maintenance failures across the entire bridge portfolio. The Veracruz Strait Bridge's maintenance contract was up for renewal in 6 weeks, against a 40% cheaper competing bid from a firm that had already begun raising concerns about Halvorson's maintenance history. A catastrophic failure occurring 6 weeks before a contract renewal vote would not just kill commuters. It would eliminate every question anyone was about to ask about who maintained the bridge. It would create a crisis large enough that emergency procurement protocols would be invoked, and Halvorson, already on site, already familiar with the bridge, would be perfectly placed to receive a no-bid remediation contract worth perhaps $400 million. 11 people died at Drummond Avenue for a maintenance contract worth a fraction of that. Dorian sits very still on the catwalk, 400 feet above black water, understanding he is looking at the same architecture twice. The obvious thing is to call 911, but Dorian imagines the response. A disgraced inspector with an active lawsuit, reporting sabotage through unauthorized access to a decommissioned gantry. He needs someone with genuine independent authority and no connection to the city or Meridian. He thinks of Priya Chandrasekhar, his graduate research advisor 9 years ago, now running an independent structural forensics firm specifically because she grew tired of watching infrastructure failures explained away by people whose paychecks depended on convenient explanations. He has avoided her calls twice in 8 months, out of shame. He calls her at 3:31 a.m. She answers on the second ring. "I need you to listen to me for 90 seconds without telling me I'm imagining things," he says. "And then I need you to call the State Bridge Authority's emergency line, because they will not listen to me, and they will listen to you." He talks. He gives her the cable mark pattern, the load point geometry, the residual capacity calculation, the failure window, Halvorson, Meridian, the contract renewal vote, the confidential settlement. When he finishes, there are 4 seconds of silence. "Send me the photographs," Priya says. "All of them. Now, while we're talking." "This is not random vandalism," Priya says, her voice dropping into the register Dorian remembers from 9 years of real engineering work. "Whoever did this understands load redistribution mathematics at a graduate level minimum. You have 20 minutes, she says. "I'm calling the Bridge Authority's chief engineer directly. I'm also calling the FBI's Critical Infrastructure Division. Then I need you off that bridge." The phone goes quiet. He has 20 minutes. He starts climbing toward the South Tower to finish his documentation. Marcus Webb, the State Bridge Authority's chief structural engineer, 26 years in bridge engineering, answers his personal cell at 3:52 a.m. and recognizes Priya Chandrasekhar's voice before she finishes saying her name. She talks for 4 minutes without softening anything. "Who's the inspector who found this?" he asks. "The Drummond Avenue inspector," Priya says. A silence lasts 4 full seconds. Marcus Webb does not hesitate for 90 seconds. He hesitates for 11. "I'm calling an emergency bridge closure," he says. "Effective immediately. I would rather explain an unnecessary closure to an angry commissioner than explain to 11 more families why I didn't act." The Veracruz Strait Bridge closes to all traffic at 4:31 a.m., 39 minutes after Dorian's call, 2 hours and 44 minutes before the calculated failure window begins. The closure is announced as a precautionary structural inspection, a deliberately bloodless phrase chosen to avoid alerting whoever placed the cable cuts that their plan has been detected. Dorian is still on the bridge when state police vehicles arrive at 4:38 a.m. He has completed documentation of all 41 cable compromise points across both suspension cables and climbed down, exhausted in the specific bone-deep way that comes after hours of physical exertion sustained entirely by adrenaline. Officer Renata Solis finds Dorian sitting on the guardrail. "Sir, this area is closed," she says, the standard opening of someone who hasn't yet been briefed. "I know," Dorian says. "I'm the one who called this in." She looks at him with professional skepticism. A tired, unshaven man in climbing gear at 4:40 in the morning, claiming to have personally discovered a sabotage plot. Then her radio crackles. "If there's a man on scene named Castellanos, do not let him leave. Do not detain him as a suspect. He is the reporting party and he has data we need." Officer Solis looks at Dorian for a long moment. "Okay," she says. "Let's get you somewhere warm." Special Agent Theodora Bond of the FBI's Critical Infrastructure Squad arrives by 6:15 a.m. with a 4-person evidence team, having driven 90 minutes at speeds exceeding normal operating parameters. By 7 a.m., the hour the calculated failure window would have been 15 minutes from beginning, Agent Bond has confirmed the cable compromise pattern is consistent with deliberate sabotage requiring advanced structural engineering knowledge, and the case is elevated to a joint FBI state task force with full federal resources. By 11 a.m., investigators identify 4 visits in 6 weeks by a 2-person maintenance crew whose equipment checkout records don't match any authorized work order. By 2 p.m., the technicians are identified and brought in. By 4 p.m., one of them, 29-year-old Calvin Reyes, facing the terror of understanding what he participated in, begins cooperating, describing how his supervisor told him the work was stress testing for an insurance assessment, providing specifications Reyes assumed came from Halvorson's own engineering department. The specifications trace through a warrant to a structural engineering consultant named Victor Aldrich, who left Meridian Civic Partners 4 years ago after raising internal concerns that Meridian's maintenance subsidiaries were systematically underperforming contracted work to maximize profit margins. The same concern Dorian had flagged, silence through a severance agreement and confidentiality clause, rather than a public termination. Victor Aldrich's consulting business failed for 4 years because Meridian's extensive relationships meant no firm wanted to be seen working with someone Meridian had quietly blacklisted. Victor Aldrich did not engineer the sabotage out of loyalty. He engineered it in exchange for a contract, a guaranteed $22 million subcontracting relationship with whatever firm received the emergency remediation contract following the bridge's catastrophic failure. A contract Meridian had all but guaranteed would go to Halvorson, a blacklisted engineer, desperate enough, skilled enough, and angry enough at the system that destroyed his career, agreeing to engineer mass casualties in exchange for being let back inside the system that exiled him. Dorian reads this conclusion in the federal indictment 3 weeks later and sits with it for a long time, recognizing something in Victor Aldrich's path he does not want to recognize. The same blacklisting, the same financial desperation, the same system that exiles the people who raise concerns and protects the people who profit from ignoring them. The only difference that matters, the difference Dorian holds on to, is that Victor Aldrich chose, when the system broke him, to become an instrument of the same violence that broke him. Dorian chose, when the system broke him, to keep listening to bridges anyway. The Veracruz Strait Bridge reopens 9 days later, after a complete cable replacement on all 41 compromised load points, paid for entirely by Halvorson Infrastructure Solutions and a court-ordered asset freeze on Meridian's subsidiaries. The Drummond Avenue civil suit against Dorian personally is dropped 4 months later, citing new evidence. The same digital timestamp he submitted 11 months earlier, now finally taken seriously. His professional engineering license is fully reinstated 6 weeks after that. The license reinstatement letter does not apologize. Dorian has learned institutions almost never apologize. But its final paragraph notes the inspector's exemplary professional conduct in the matter of the Veracruz Strait Bridge incident, a sentence Dorian reads 4 times, slowly. In the kitchen he was 6 weeks from losing 11 months ago and has, through a state commendation stipend and several engineering firms now eager to hire him, managed to keep. Priya Chandrasekhar calls him the week the letter arrives. "You should come work for me," she says. Not as a junior associate, as a partner. You listened to a bridge at midnight and you were the only person in this entire state who understood what it was trying to tell you. That is not a liability. That is the entire reason my firm exists. Come listen to bridges with me, properly. With authority this time, and people who will actually act when you tell them what you hear. He starts the following Monday. 6 months later, Dorian Castellanos stands on the Veracruz Strait Bridges pedestrian walkway at dawn, with full legal authorization, a badge that opens the maintenance gantry's digital lock instead of a decommissioned physical key he was never supposed to keep. The bridge is quiet around him in the specific way of infrastructure functioning correctly. He places his hand against the primary suspension cable, the same gesture that started everything, and listens. The cable sings back at him, clean and even, telling him that everything, for now, is exactly what it should be. He thinks about Drummond Avenue, the 11 names he has memorized and will never stop carrying. He thinks about Victor Aldrich and how close that exact same darkness came to claiming him too. He thinks about a phone call at 3:31 a.m., answered on the second ring, by someone who believed him completely before he had finished a single sentence. The morning traffic builds across the bridge behind him, 70,000 ordinary lives moving across 400 feet of black water on cables that, this morning, are exactly as strong as they're supposed to be. He has spent his whole career listening to steel. For 11 months, nobody listened back. Now, finally, someone does. He goes to work,